custom decorating you will find at West Side Decorating Center. Good morning on this Tuesday. I'm Art Lewis. Thanks for joining us. Lots of things coming up this morning. Later on after the 10 o'clock news, a Saginaw native has written a book. Vivian Lee is her name, and the book is The Invisible Girl from Ames Street, her life back in the 60s. We will talk to her about that after the 10 o'clock news. At 11 o'clock, we will talk about Funway Amusements and some things coming up July 4th there. We'll do it with their general manager. But for this hour, we in the Great Lakes Bay region, and I've said this many times, are blessed with a lot of wonderful things that add to our quality of life. How many communities of about 400,000 people can you think of that have 2 symphony orchestras, multiple art museums, multiple theater companies, and multiple musical groups such as bands? And one of them we're going to talk about this morning. It's been around since the 20s, and that is not the 2020s, but the 1920s. And it is the Saginaw Eddy Concert Band. And with us this morning, the man who stands on the podium, it's conductor Joe Radke. Joe, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hope the winter was good and spring was good.
Yes, and it is awesome to be in the summer.
Because school's out, and
yes.
Joe is a teacher in the Greenville system, teaches music, and known him for quite a number of years. Maybe, and I don't know if you probably have some of it at least, a little bit of history of the Eddy Band and how it all happened, that we have this glorious institution that we don't pay to see.
Well, long story short, a C.K. Eddy donated or made a trust fund so that this band could exist. And, at the beginning, this band was parades and ceremonies and things like that, and it's turned into this awesome community band that gets to perform all summer for the residents of Saginaw and anybody that wants to come for free.
It was originally considered to be a uniformed band, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is it still in its charter?
No. I mean, we wear uniforms, but,
if you can call it tuxedo a uniform.
Yeah. we wear, polo shirts, and we all look the same.
Yeah, you all look the same.
That's what we do. Because it's the summer. It's hot outside. So I don't know how they did that back then.
Yeah, I don't either. They were made of wool, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody were to say to you, describe to me the Eddy Band, how would you describe it?
I would describe it as one of the best concert bands in Michigan that meets 2 times a week and performs concerts every Sunday, and is full of just amazing people from the Saginaw area and maybe a half-hour, 45-minute circle around Saginaw. And we have an awesome audience, and all the concerts are outdoors. It's very family-friendly. And
not all of the musicians are professionals, are they?
No, but most of them are in some way or another. So whether they're retired teachers or current teachers or students that are studying music in college or, professional musicians, and kind of a big mix of all of that.
Explains why it's so tight.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really a cool part of my job is that I get to find these people to play in the band.
Okay, so I have to ask you a personal question because it was originally thought that last year might have been your last year with the band by your own decision. Mm-hmm. What changed your mind, Joe?
The Christmas concert. I moved, and this drive is pretty long. So, with teaching and all of that, it gets to be a lot. But I think part of that was just me coming out of all of the stuff that happened during the pandemic, and everything felt like more work. But after planning the Christmas concert and going, and I stepped up on that rehearsal, and I was like, I can't stop doing this. This is the best job in the world.
Yeah, and I have to tell everybody because I announced the Christmas concert, and originally there was going to be remarks about the fact that this is Joe's final, and we struck those out because it turned out not to be.
Yeah,
which everybody was happy about.
This season has been great too. It's been so much fun. I now I can't even imagine wanting to do that. So,
not do what you mean.
Right? Yes. Yeah. That's what I mean.
So let's talk about this season because it's partially underway. I mean, you've already had 3 or 4 concerts. What's next?
Oh, okay. So this week on Sunday, we are doing a family children's concert based around stories. So we have stories from we're going to do some of William Tell Overture, and we're going to do some video game music. And one piece I'm really excited about is a Scott Joplin march, a Scott Joplin rag, that's based on a story from 2 trains in Texas. They decided for fun and for promotional reasons they were going to crash 2 trains together head on. And, of course, it didn't turn out so good, but there were 40,000 people there to watch that. And you think about what we do for fun now. Back then, they're crashing 2 trains together. So I'm pretty excited about that and telling that story.
Yeah, which these would have been steam trains, would have been rather explosive when they hit.
Right. When the boilers collided, and I guess the trains were going faster than they had expected. I mean, they backed them up and then ran them together, hoping to be at about 40 miles an hour. The conductors jumped out of the trains after they got them going, and the spectators were up on the hills watching, and the media was like 100 yards away. And of course, some people didn't make it, but it leveled the trains. And apparently they did this in Tennessee before this, and the trains, when they hit, kind of went up like a triangle. But these trains, they just flattened each other out. And
it should be an interesting piece of explosive music.
Yeah, yes, for real. And so Scott Joplin wrote a rag for this, so it'll be really interesting to.
It's interesting terms because you keep wanting to say march because if you were talking about Sousa, it would be a march.
Right.
But Joplin wrote rags. What's the difference between a march and a rag?
Well, actually, not much. A rag is sort of like a march with jazz in it. Yeah, syncopation. Yeah. It's really the roots of where jazz started to come from.
And most of that came out of piano, didn't it?
Yeah. Scott Joplin wrote it for piano originally.
And thus we had ragtime.
Yes. Yep. And around that same time period, that those trains would have been smashing into each other.
Oh, what we did for entertainment back then. My goodness. And just so everybody understands, where is the Eddie Band performing now?
The Jolt Credit Union Event Park, which is right by the Dow Event Center. It is one of the best outdoor venues that I've ever been able to perform in. It's easy to hear. It's easy to park. It's just a great place for concerts.
And just in case inclement weather, what happens?
We just go across the street into the Dow Event Center. If it's just kind of raining, we've been inviting the audience to come right up underneath the shell, which we love. It's really neat to have the audience sitting that close, so almost like they're playing the concert with us. So some of the best concerts we've had it's been sprinkling out.
And what times it start?
7:00.
And the cost is
nothing.
Yeah,
it's free. Even parking is free.
And that is a caveat of the trust, is it not?
Yes, it is. We're not even allowed to charge money. So
the trust, does the trust provide all?
Yes. Yep.
That
we pay.
Survived a long time.
Yeah, and I mean all the musicians get compensated, and we have money for advertising and all that kind of stuff. It's really a neat system that we get to deal with that a lot of groups don't get.
No. Well, there's a lot of generosity involved there from the Eddy family.
Yes, for real. And I have to say, we have a really strong board of directors. They're volunteers that make sure that all this stuff happens too. And thank those people because they do a lot of the work, like making sure we have a venue to perform in, and making sure that we have advertising and the word gets out, and all of those behind the scenes things that people don't really think about when they think of concerts.
All right, we're going to take a break. Come back. We're talking to Joe Radke. He is the conductor of the Saginaw Eddy Concert Band, and we will have more with him when we return.
As we head into the...
All right, back with you on the Art Lewis Show on WSGW. In studio with me is Joe Radke. He is the conductor of the Saginaw Eddy Concert Band. The band is, as we talked about, a mixture of professionals and amateurs, but mostly professionals. How long does it take to rehearse a concert? Like, for example, the one coming up Sunday for children. How much time do you put in rehearsing?
We have 2.5 hour rehearsals. So we basically, on a Tuesday rehearsal, we read through the music and make little fixes. And then on Thursday, we deep dive the things that need to be rehearsed so that it's prepared for the concert on Sunday.
You do it just like an orchestra conductor. You start the piece, you play the piece, you stop the piece, you fix the piece, you play the piece.
Yes, yep. You play it through, and then you listen, and then you fix what needs to be fixed. And with concerts that happen so often, it's really the case. A lot of it's left up to the musicians to make sure they're ready. They have to be ready for their part. So I can make the little fixes that need, because there isn't a lot of time. You do an hour of music on a concert, it's really not much time to rehearse it. Maybe a couple of minutes every piece. So yeah, it's fun though. It's fun that challenge is fun.
Well, it's interesting because my interactions with orchestras and bands revolves around one piece, Lincoln Portrait. I did it with the Eddie Band decades, I think, ago. I did it with the Saginaw Symphony Orchestra, I want to say 6 or 7 years now, and I'm doing it again this year. And I don't read the music, so I have it scripted out in notes, and and I depend on the conductor to look over and go,
yes,
that works. But it's amazing if no one has ever stood in front of an orchestra or a band like the Eddie Band and heard the power of the music right behind you. It's an experience. It took me by surprise when I did the first rehearsal for it. Wow, the power was unreal.
Yeah, I have the best seat in the house. I get to hear everything equidistant, and I'm as close as you can get.
For you, that could be the best or the worst seat.
Yes, I guess so.
Because you also hear every note that's...
Oh, yeah. When we do the Stars and Stripes Forever and those piccolos stand up and they're like right there by my ear, it's something to be heard. They're so loud. They sound great. Not saying that.
Are there pieces of music like that you really don't have to rehearse?
Yeah, I mean, Stars and Stripes we have to touch on, but we've done it so many times. I mean,
it's the classic.
Yeah. Sleigh Ride, those kinds of things. Some of the marches, and I really try to program a few things on every concert that we really don't have to rehearse too hard, so that we have more time for the other pieces.
So typically in a season, in the summer season, you do what, about 8 concerts?
Yes, 8 concerts.
And then the Christmas concert.
And the Christmas.
And that's become tradition too.
Yes. Yep. So it's about 90 pieces of music over the year for the band to learn and for me to learn.
So let's talk about other concerts. Now, this Sunday is the Story Hour concert with the youngsters. What happens next? It's every week, right?
Yeah, it's every week. Every week has a theme. I think the week after that is a Spanish theme.
Yes.
And so we'll do things like Malagueña and, those kinds of, like, with the Spanish flair. I can't 100% remember if everything fits Spanish, but I try to get as close as I can. And then the week after that, I think we have songs. We have a singer.
A festival prelude.
Yeah. Maybe maybe I'm a week early. That would be
That's
6,
July
right?
21st.
Yeah. So it's all festival kind of music. So celebratory style. And then the week after that is the song week.
July 28th is Worldwide Favorites, and then August 4th is Song and Dance.
Yeah, there you go. You've got the info.
You asked questions, I'll give you the answer.
I did this program in, I don't know, it was January.
I was going to say, when do you set the season?
I really try hard to have it done in about January, so that I have time to process the music ahead of time.
Is it music that you have in your library, or do you have to go out and rent the books, so to
I
speak?
would say 90% is in the library, and the other 10% we purchase. Like, for example, this weekend we're doing some video game music that was just composed for band or arranged for band, so we just bought that. But most of the music is in the library at this point.
And much of what you play is in public domain, isn't it?
There is quite a bit now that's in public domain, yeah.
And explain to folks, if it's not in public domain, you have to pay royalties on it, right?
Yeah, we pay a membership to the band associations, so that's all covered under that membership for public performance. But you have to purchase the music. You can't do music that you borrow from somebody or whatever. You have to do the music that you have purchased. And we public domain would be like a Sousa March now. A lot of the Sousa stuff is in public domain. You can there's
For those that don't understand, public domain means its copyright is now gone.
yes, yeah.
So nobody has rights to it anymore, so to speak.
So you can go on the President's Own Marine Band website, and they have all the Sousa Marches and their version of them, their transcriptions. The Sousa Marches.
And you could download that?
Yeah.
And you can use it?
Yeah.
No kidding.
So most of the Sousa Marches we have, so we don't have to do
You
that.
don't have
but
to do that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a great resource. You can go there, and the Marine Band, they have all their notes on the decisions they made during the march. Sousa was famous for running his marches sort of like a jazz band. So they would have these little books, and the musicians would put them on their music stands, and he would just call out a march, and then he would use hand signals to cue, like maybe the clarinets lay out here and no trumpets there, and let's bring the drums down and have the brass stand up. He had all these little cues that the band just knew. So there wasn't a version of the march that was the standard. Every time there's a performance, it would be different. You know, if he was inside, he might make everybody play, or less people play. If he's outside, more people play. So I think that's a really neat part of the Sousa March history that a lot of people don't know, is there isn't a standard Sousa March that Sousa wrote to be the same every time. He wrote it so that he could edit it while people were playing.
Does that give you freedom?
It does. It does. We have lots of times in the marches where we'll make decisions to like leave out the trumpets on the first time through the trio, or, you know, have the clarinets play down an octave when we're trying to play softer. You know, things like that Sousa would do all the time. And some of that stuff is in those notes that composers have written over the years of research they've done from people that were in the Sousa band.
Eddie conductors, I mean.
Yeah. Yes.
So if I said to you, are you going to play Stars and Stripes, which is everybody knows Stars and Stripes. If you play it today, will it be the same tomorrow? Will it be the same the next day?
If it's my version, it will be similar every time because I have the way that I like to do it. But I would argue that anytime you hear a performance anywhere, it's going to be a little bit different. Every band has a little bit of a personality. This year's Eddie Band has a little bit of a different musical personality than last year's Eddie Band. And I conduct 2 community bands. I do another one in the middle of the state called the Central Missionary Concert Band. And their version of the Stars and Stripes is different than the Eddie Band's version. Like the way that they perform it, the way that the musicians perceive their phrases and things. It's kind of fascinating sometimes.
How many members of the Eddie Band? How many?
Around 60. It kind of goes up or down depending on what we need for the week.
That's fairly sizable. And
It
a
is.
lot of them are repeaters, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The good portion of the band has been in it for some time now.
All right, we'll take a break. Come back. We're talking to Joe Radke. He's the conductor of the Saginaw Eddie Concert Band. We'll remind you of the season again and talk a little bit more about music with Joe when we return.
Brickleberry Farm.
All right, we're back with you here on WSGW. We're talking to Joe Radke. He's the conductor of the Saginaw Eddie Concert Band. This Sunday, July 7th, is Story Hour. Bring the kids down to Joel Park. And remember, it is a free concert, ladies and gentlemen. What time does it start?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. If you're going to sit on the grass, bring a chair or two and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, bring a picnic basket, chair.
It is fun to do that, isn't it?
It
really
is.
So what got you into music, Joe? When you were a kid growing up, did you want to be a musician?
I would have to say that it was probably the music that happened in the house. My dad was an avid listener, and I mean everything from, you know, the Boston Pops to the band Chicago was playing in our house constantly, and I just loved music. And then when band came up, the subject of band, I decided to play trombone, and that's how I got in.
Why trombone?
I don't know. It looked cool. It got a cool slide. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because I grew up in New York City, and I always wanted to play drums. You don't do that in the New York apartment. It's not a good idea.
Well, most parents say, no,
Yeah, well,
not drums.
I wasn't that smart. I had 2 drummers. Both of my sons are drummers. But I picked up the licorice stick, the clarinet. Don't know why, I just did. And played it for a while. But I'll tell you, though, at 81 years old, I regret not continuing it. Every now and then, I get a bug up my fanny to go out and maybe buy a clarinet book and relearn the fingering and all that stuff, you know. And, I mean, my fingers know where to go on it, but I don't know what the notes are anymore. So it's
Well, a lot of the adults that are in the community band that I direct, that haven't been playing for 30, 40, 50 years, they'll show up, and yeah, the first 2 weeks are rough, but it just comes back. It's like riding a bike. You did it so much on the way through that your brain will call it up somewhere.
yeah. Well, I can still. It's interesting because I can still play the clarinet. I just can't make music with the clarinet.
Yeah, it takes some time.
I can blow the notes, but I don't know what they are, and I can't put them together. You know, but that's music is something that sticks with us, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah, I feel like it chose me. To really answer your question, I feel like the trombone chose me, and I feel like this path has just been doors opening for me along the way.
So you're a teacher of music. You teach in a school system. And for a long time when schools were having financial problems, sports and music, out the door. It was a mistake, wasn't it? Because music is a teaching tool more than just entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much evidence of the things that music do to kids and people that are learning music. It activates parts of your brain that doesn't happen with any other activity, and it creates connections in your brain. So, you know, you've got to remember things. You've got these little neural pathways, and practicing music strengthens those neural pathways. But more than that, it's a social thing. It's especially right now where there's a tendency to be less social. Having a band to play in middle school and high school can be super important. These kids have to get together. They have to be present. They have to be with each other.
And they can't be thumbing their answers on a phone.
Oh, yes, or typing their answers on a computer, or just be daydreaming, you know, because you can't do 50% band. You can't play half a B flat. You have to totally go in all the time. I argue that no one will ever listen to you as intently as another musician is listening to you when you're playing together. You have to play at the right time, the right note, with the right intensity, with the right volume, in tune, and you have to do that on every single note for like 10 minutes straight. When is anybody going to listen to you like that?
I think you just drove half the people away from music.
Well, you don't think of it that way while you're playing, but you know, I some of my best friends are, you know, it's because of the music that brought us together, and I feel like they're my best friends because of that situation.
When I went to school, which was a long time ago, but when I was I think it was in the New York City school system, I think it was like the 4th grade, maybe the 5th, where you had to choose an instrument. And you had to take music. It was mandated. It was part of the curriculum. That's gone away, hasn't it?
There are a few schools left that do that. But yeah, it's largely gone away. And part of the problem with that right now is just money. You know, if you're going to mandate that everybody has to be in the program, then you also have to have instruments for those people that can't afford it. And some people just don't want to pay that.
Well, back in the day, I mean, yeah, we were given an instrument with the option to buy it. And they brought in teachers for that instrument. In other words, my music teacher in school did not teach me the clarinet. A clarinet teacher taught me the clarinet.
That would be amazing.
It was, but for every group of instruments, for example, if you were studying violin or viola, they had teachers for that they brought in from the outside, and that's how we learned. And it was intense in the beginning too, because that's where you were getting your foundation, because you were learning to read the notes, you were learning the fingering on your instrument, and the mouthing, the embouchure, and I remember that clearly as if it was yesterday. I remember the guy they brought in to teach me the clarinet. And, you know, in 5th grade.
That would be amazing. Like, that's my dream right there. We have a budget to bring in people to help, but it couldn't be full time. You know, like I would love. What do I know about flute? Right? I'm a trombone player.
It's like, yes, exactly. You know?
So, yeah, I would be so. That would be
a lot of it today requires the student to go out and get a private T-shirt, right?
Yeah, and I'm lucky in our district. We have a very large support. We have a lot of support for the arts, and it's just like this unique little beacon in the middle of nowhere. And we have money for lessons, and we have money for group instruction, and we have this large endowment to help purchase things for the program.
Any chance the name Meyer goes with any of that?
Meyer, yeah,
Because that's where they're headquartered.
yeah. Meyer Music is a really great resource that we have down there. But a lot of this is just community based. We have this foundation called the Hour 3 Foundation, which really just supports us. Every year we make a list of things that we might need, and we propose them, and we almost always get what we're asked for.
Wow.
And it's just incredible. And the community supports that.
All right, one more break. We'll be back to remind you all about the Eddie Band concerts. Let me take a moment to tell you about Quick Lane Freeland, next to my car dealer, McDonald Ford. This is your one-stop for all of your routine maintenance, your oil changes, brakes, tires, batteries, the like. And something else they do there, they take care of your health inside your car. They have something called FrigiFresh, which is a hospital-grade disinfectant that they place in your ventilation system. It kills germs, odors, pollen, all of those things to keep you healthy inside your car. And also, while they do it, have them check your cabin filter, because most newer cars have cabin filters. And you want one that's fresh so that you are safe in a safe environment when you drive your car. Stop in today. FrigiFresh is $20, and it only takes 10 minutes. No appointments necessary. At Quick Lane Freeland, right next to McDonald Ford, where they service all makes and models of cars. They keep your car or truck in tip-top shape.
It could be the best years of...
Back with you here in studio with me is Joe Radke, the conductor of the Saginaw Eddie Concert Band, this Sunday, July 7th, at the Jolt Event Park, downtown Saginaw. It's Story Hour, music for youngsters. So bring the family.
Yes, bring the family, bring the neighbors,
Bring your picnic basket.
bring your friends, bring your enemies, bring everybody.
Bring everybody, right?
Let's fill that place.
It holds 5,000, folks. There's a challenge for you. And the band, I mean, it literally, I don't know how many, quote, uniformed concert bands are there in the country anymore. It was a dwindling number for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's still a number of them, but yeah, you're right. There aren't as many for a town this size. There used to be several, so but it's still an awesome thing to have.
Yeah, but not many of them have the kind of resource you have.
Right, that is true.
All right, so let's see. July 14th is a Spanish Flair. July 21st, a festival prelude. What is that about?
It's music that has to do with celebrating something. So it's funny when I make these themes way back when, you have to try to make them general enough that you could put anything in there, but specific enough you have something to tie the concert together with. So
July 28th is Worldwide Favorites, international music, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
And August 4th is the Song and Dance. Do we have a date yet for the Christmas concert?
yes, but you know what? I don't remember what it is, but it's in November. It's around the same time
It's
the
usually
holiday season
just
starts
before
in
Thanksgiving, and the
yeah.
week before or something like
yeah,
that. Or?
it's the weekend the Saginaw starts there downtown.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Looking forward to that as always, and it's a fundraiser for us too, because we raise food for the Salvation Army in our Food for Families campaign,
It is one of my favorite concerts to do.
and it's the audiences too. And we get a big crowd. I
We
mean,
do.
We get a huge audience.
We
It's
do.
always a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun. Well, Joe, listen. Thanks for coming over from Greenville today. Now that school's out, you have time.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. It's a pleasure. And the Saginaw Eddie Concert Band, one of the gems of this region, folks. If for any reason you have never seen this band, trust me, you need to. These are professional musicians, and this band is as tight as any band you're going to see. Part of that has to do with the conductor who beats it into him, but that's beside the point. Joe, thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thank you.
And we thank you for joining us this morning. Coming up next hour, we're going to learn about a local author who has written a book. We'll tell you more about that, but first we'll take a break, and then we will be back.
I'm Paul Young, candidate.
Coming up, we have news from CBS, the National and International Report. And then we'll have the local report for you, bringing you up to date on everything happening in the region, in the state of Michigan. That'll be with Michael Percha. Then we will be back with Vivian Lee, her book, The Invisible Girl from Ames Street. The Saginaw native will tell her story.
Broadcasting from the storm.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. Hurricane Beryl is barreling west through the Caribbean as a potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm, packing 165-mile-an-hour winds. CBS meteorologist David Parkinson.
This is unheard of. We have not had a storm this strong this early in the year.
It's made landfall on several small islands, downing power lines, creating dangerous storm surge and flooding as it presses toward Jamaica. Correspondent Tom Hansen is there.
Jamaica is currently under a hurricane warning. We're expecting to see far more preparations today as that storm moves closer. The rain and those powerful winds are expected to push in early tomorrow.
Beryl blamed for at least 4 deaths. Lots more people are taking off for the 4th holiday. CBS's Stacey Lynn.
Nearly 30 million Americans are boarding planes this week. TSA spokesperson Lori Dankers is at Denver International.
Regardless of what day they're traveling or when they're traveling within the day, it's going to be extremely busy.
She says when it comes to security, travelers are their biggest partners.
We ask them to come to the airport early. We ask them to come prepared.
The Supreme Court has just agreed to consider whether a Texas law requiring pornographic websites to verify the age of users violates the Constitution's free speech protections. The appeal was filed by a trade group that represents adult entertainment performers and companies. The law was enacted last year to prevent people under the age of 18 from accessing sexual material. A deadly stampede in northern India. Officials say at least 60 people have died in a crush of humanity at a religious gathering that may have attracted a crowd of 15,000. The event organizers only had permission to host about 5,000. A new evacuation order and deaths in southern Gaza. Correspondent Holly Williams reports from Tel Aviv.
The evacuation order was sent via audio message, on cell phones and via social media, and thousands of people have already begun to flee their homes. Meanwhile, 8 Palestinians were killed in Khan Yunis in an Israeli bombardment. That's according to Hamas health officials.
An NBA superstar led the Celtics to a championship last month. Now they're showing him the money.
Tatum drives inside, lays it in. The long arms of Jason Tatum.
Tatum has reportedly agreed to a 5-year, $314 million deal with Boston. The 5-time All-Star stands to make more than $71 million per season, with the largest contract in NBA history. The Dow is down 63 points in early trading. This is CBS News.
Sponsored by Progressive.
Ready to save big at the live from the 100.5 and 790 newsroom. This is WSGW News.
Mostly cloudy skies and 68 degrees at 10:05. Good morning, I'm Mike Percha. A 51-year-old man faces up to life in prison for operating a large-scale drug operation in the Saginaw Bay area. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Michigan, Ricardo Delgado II was convicted yesterday in federal court on numerous drug and gun felonies. Following a massive investigation by the FBI and partner agencies, Delgado was arrested as the leader of a wide-ranging drug conspiracy involving bringing large quantities of cocaine and fentanyl from Mexico for distribution in the area. The FBI found Delgado was seeking retaliation for the theft of his drugs from a subordinate and ordered that person to get revenge, which was stopped by law enforcement. Charges against him include possession with intent to distribute cocaine and fentanyl, possession of a machine gun, felon in possession of a firearm, possession of an unregistered silencer, and several other charges. A fire completely destroyed a home in Midland County on Sunday. Crews responded to a house on Sturgeon Road north of Baker Road in Mills Township around 1:40 p.m. where the fire was raging. A cause of the fire hasn't been listed, though officials say urethane foam insulation in the walls acted as an accelerant, causing the fire to spread rapidly from garage to breezeway and attic. A passerby who reported the fire helped the female resident to evacuate. No injuries were reported. The Disability Network of Mid-Michigan, Corteva Agriscience, and the Great Lakes Loons are hosting an Inclusion Day July 28th. The event will take place at Dow Diamond during the Loons games starting at 1:05. The goal of the event is to bring together every demographic possible. Kids eat free and get to run the bases. An all-star exhibition game featuring the Great Lakes Miracle League and the Middle of the Mitt Miracle League will take place after the game. Dial-A-Ride is also extending their hours for the event, though riders must schedule the rides ahead of time at 989-837-6940. WSGW News Time 10:07.
Attention, Saginaw. After
GW News Time 10:08, the weather forecast is coming up. Those close to Governor Gretchen Whitmer are pushing back against a report Politico is claiming the governor called the Biden campaign and told them Michigan is no longer winnable in the November election. Politico dropped the story Monday, claiming Whitmer called President Biden's campaign manager Friday after the debate to soften speculation she might be gunning to replace him on the Democratic ticket. The report also claims Whitmer told campaign staff the Democratic advantage in Michigan was slipping away, especially in light of last week's debate. Politico claims their source for the Whitmer call is a Whitmer rival, also seen as a potential replacement candidate. Michigan State Police say their department, along with other city officers and local and county police enforcement officials, will be monitoring roads heavily for speeding and reckless driving. In July, the departments will utilize federal funding to conduct dedicated speed enforcement. State Police Lieutenant Mike Shaw says it's all in an effort to keep drivers safe from risky driving behaviors.
Over 1,000 people were killed on Michigan roadways in 2022. Totally unacceptable. We want to make sure that we start to change these driving behaviors to reduce these preventable traffic crashes, to allow more people to experience a full life instead of having their life taken short by somebody that was driving inappropriately.
In 2022, Michigan saw nearly 27,000 crashes related to speeding. WSGW News Time 10:10. I'm Mike Percha.
Needs all in one stop. Westside Decorating Center. Good morning. Welcome to Hour 2 of the Art Lewis Show. We all have stories to tell about our lives, but few of us sit down and actually put pen to paper and create a storyline or a book even about our lives growing up. But that is not the case for my guest this morning. She was born in Saginaw, Michigan, has a story to tell about that, and the book is called The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, subtitled A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food. And her name is Vivian Shelby is her name now, but she goes under Vivian Lee, which was her name. And we are pleased to welcome Vivian to the program from Cape Girardeau, Missouri this morning. Vivian, good morning.
Good morning, Art. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners about my memoirs.
So let's start, Vivian, without being a crass man and not ask you how old you are. What period of time are we talking about you living in Saginaw? When were you born here and how long were you here?
Well, I was born, of course, in the 1950s, like so many of the baby boomers. And the story that I have written was based on my age of 7, 8, and 9 in 1962, 63, and early 1964.
All right, so we understand where all these stories are coming from. what was, in a generic kind of way, what was life like for you in terms of family?
Well, the 1960s was a time of great wealth and growth and opportunity for families in Saginaw. But unfortunately, it was also an era when there was little opportunity for single parents. And my mother, unfortunately, was left by my father in late 50s. And so she was raising 3 children on her own. And that was not something that was reflected in most of Saginaw at the time. So we were more or less on our own. And so that was my experience.
Would you describe the family setting as impoverished?
That would be a good way of putting it. It was impoverished, but it was full of love and hope and laughter, and I lived in my imagination. So it wasn't just my life I was living, and I write about. It was the life I lived inside of my imagination, which I understand a lot of children who go through poverty and trauma do the same thing.
So that's an interesting comment, because you live inside your imagination.
Yes.
In the real world, you go to school with an empty belly, probably go to bed with one at night. But in your mind, what are you telling yourself in your mind while your body is going through that kind of an experience?
Well, gosh, that is a really good question. Nobody has asked me that. But when you look at the subtitle, A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food, in my mind, I am walking with God. God is always with me, and he is in my heart. And so I never really felt alone. And everywhere that I roamed in Saginaw, which were places where children probably shouldn't be roaming, such as the railroad tracks and the streets of the city, I always looked for TV cameras that would mirror the life that Beaver Cleaver or Opie Taylor on the television shows that I watched. So I imagined that I was really in a TV show. I wasn't really roaming along. I had TV cameras following me, and I was a show, just like I saw on television. Does that make sense?
It was an escape from reality.
It was definitely an escape from reality, but it was more real to me than the empty belly. It was more real to me than the cold.
Well, I want to kind of break this down into little pieces so we can digest this, and I want to start with God. You know, at 7, 8, 9 years old, had you been taught about God? Was your mother religious, for example? When did God come into your life?
God came deeply into my heart through something that is going on right now at this time of year at churches all over the country, and it's Vacation Bible School. I went to Zion Lutheran School's Vacation Bible School, and we learned wonderful songs about the joy, joy, joy down in my heart. And that just entered into my heart, and I never, ever felt alone.
And has God stayed with you throughout your life?
Yes, he has. And what he has, his guardian angels have worked overtime protecting me. And it was actually, for me, it was a healing in this book, a God healing in this book, because I was getting all these memories of my time on Ames Street, which they never left me. But I would start writing down all my memories, and I wrote them, and I roamed the streets in my memory as an adult growing up.
We're going to get into some of the specifics about education in particular, but
Sure.
When did you leave Ames Street in Saginaw?
We left Ames Street in August of 1974 when my family was evicted because rent went up $25 a month, and my mother just couldn't take that hit. So we were evicted, and my grandparents took us in. But I left Saginaw in the early 1970s.
And went where? How did you end up in Cape Girardeau, Missouri?
Oh, gosh. Well, a roundabout way, it took me about 20 years to get here, but that would be another book. My car basically broke down here on my way back to move back to Saginaw.
Never made it, huh?
I never made it. I keep telling my husband, I'm never going to get out of here. But I did just leave Saginaw. I had an opportunity to meet with my Arthur Hill High School class of 1973. We met at the Junction Restaurant to have a book signing, and we had a chance to look at the beautiful silos.
Oh, yeah.
So did get to go back to Saginaw, and that was a different experience than when I was the invisible girl on Ames Street. That was for sure.
All right, well, hang on. I have to take a break, and we'll come back. We're chatting with Vivian Lee. The book is The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food, and her life in the early years here in Saginaw. We will return with Vivian after these notes.
Service. It's hard to find.
All right, we're back with you on the Art Lewis Show. My guest, Vivian Lee, the book The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, her life growing up in the 60s in Saginaw. Vivian, I have to ask about the title. What made you an invisible girl?
The Invisible Girl on Ames Street. Of course, Ames Street was a home I lived on, but I felt as if nobody saw my suffering. Nobody saw my hunger. People tended to look over the head of children who were going without or struggling, because it was easier than facing them in the eyes and saying, wow, how can I help this child? So I felt as if I went my life not being looked at. And part of that, of course, when a person goes through trauma, they keep to themselves. They mask their trauma. They'll smile. They won't speak up about their trauma, their hunger, or their abuse or neglect. And while I thought that was me, I realize now that it is still happening, maybe even worse today. And I did feel invisible. In fact, the invisibility that I felt seemed like a superpower. Like nobody really looked at me. It didn't feel bad. It just felt a protection, a wall of protection, of invisibility around me.
And the cover of your book speaks to that. I see this image of a young child walking away from the camera down a brick-lined street, and nobody else around. And it's a heartbreaking photo when you think about it.
Yes, it is. Originally, I had sent a picture with my face turned around, and the publisher said, we should probably make this without a face. And I think what they said was correct. To me, when I saw that street, it looked to me like Niagara Street looked in the early 60s over by the river. Mm-hmm. So, and that's exactly, I cried when I saw the cover for the first time, because the feeling is right there in the cover picture.
Let me jump ahead here just for a second, because I'm curious about these things. You grow up in poverty, basically in some ways a loner.
Yes.
When did you finally feel you broke out of that?
It wasn't until I wrote the book.
That long?
And it took me, I was 60 years old, and I started writing this book about why do I keep to myself? Why do I keep from having close relationships with friends? And I started writing. It started kind of bitter, starting writing down these memories. I'm this way because I'm like a mushroom growing in the dark. And then I opened up a newspaper, and in it, some Lutheran schools were doing school supplies for families, not just backpacks with pencils and crayons, but school pictures and helping people with cars and so many things. Then I started realizing, whoa, it's not just me. This is still going on. I just changed the direction of the book completely from healing me to how can we help others? How can we heal others? How can we recognize the hidden pain, the hidden suffering that people walk through? And I realized then that we all wear a mask of some sort. So that completely changed things. But I was in my 60s, and it took me almost 9 years to write the book because some chapters were too painful to move on. And, of course, I was having fun and living my life. But I always came back to this book in hopes that maybe we can make a difference for somebody else.
All right, let's drag you back into the 60s. You're a hungry child. You mentioned the word abuse. Were you an abused child?
I was. My abuse, yes and no. Yes, my mother pondered and waited for my father to return, because back then a woman had to wait 7 years after being abandoned to get a divorce without their consent. They had to be declared dead, and then she could get a divorce. And at one time, my mother did date a man who she thought would be a good man for the family and for her, and he did abuse my sister and then me, and she immediately got rid of him. So that wasn't something that was ongoing. But the abuse that I had mostly came from adults in school that I went to. And it wasn't like sex abuse or anything, but it was more bullying by adults.
So I hear from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that despite the poverty, your mother did show you love.
Yes. I think looking back, we never talked about it, but she did show us love. And, poverty doesn't always mean filth. We cleaned our house every single evening before we went to bed. We always had a clean house. We cleaned our house on Saturdays. We laughed. We sang. I have memories of my mother dancing in the living room with my little brother to Chubby Checker, twisting. And yes, she did love us. There was a lot of love, and poverty doesn't necessarily mean sorrow.
But when you left the house and went to school, poverty follow you?
Yes. I lived across the street from the old Herrig School, and that was the most magical time of my life, was living on Ames Street across from Herrig School. In the summer, I could hear the boys with the push carts pushing the ice cream, jingling the bells for kids to come outside, and screen doors slamming, and there was joy and laughter. But when my mother decided that she needed help raising her children, she sent us to a school a mile away, and I had to turn my back on Herrig School, which was my beloved safe haven, and walk a mile to the new school. And that was the change in my life right there.
What was it like? Did you make friends in school?
No, I made friends at Herrig School, again, because it was the neighborhood school, but I did not make friends at the new school because, unknown to me, because it was so deviant behavior for a woman to raise children alone without a father in the household, I was used as the bad example of what would happen to you if you make mistakes in your life. So I didn't make friends with the kids because we had people in that school who pitted one child against the other, one group against the other. And let's face it, I looked different. I didn't have a really good haircut. I didn't have the clothes that they had. I didn't have the lunch card to get lunch. So I was an outsider, and I really didn't relate to what the other children were experiencing as far as sports and parental help.
And this was before the time that they provided lunch for those that couldn't afford it.
Absolutely. I could smell the food. I could see the food, but I wasn't allowed to taste the food.
All right, hang on, Vivian. We'll be right back. We're talking to Vivian Lee, the book The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food. And we'll talk more about that when we return.
As we head into the...
And we're back with you on the Art Lewis Show, chatting with Vivian Lee, who has written the book The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, her life growing up in Saginaw in the 60s. It's A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food. And Vivian, I understand the subtitle. I understand the search for God, Walt Disney, food. I don't understand the search for communists. Explain that, please.
Well, my life was based around television. Captain Kangaroo read to me. I learned life lessons through television shows, but I also learned about what was happening and the dangers in the world through the Huntley Brinkley program. And that was during the Cuban missile crisis, and we were having attack. Was it when you go under your desk, when you're all worried about the communists were going to attack you with missiles, and we had to hide under our desks. And there were a lot of commercials about fallout shelters. And it was after World War II, so there were a lot of war movies that I watched at the Court Theater and on television. And so I was always keenly aware that the communists could come anytime because Saginaw looked just like those other cities that in these movies and television and news stories were could happen in Saginaw. So I was always on the lookout for the communists because they were a great threat to me as an 8-year-old.
Let me ask about your brother and sister. You were the middle child, and did you stay in touch with them throughout life?
Yeah, yes, I did. And in fact, as I was writing the book, in particular my sister, because she's 2 years older, and in the book I would tell her a story that I was writing, and she would say, well, that's through your eyes. It was different through my eyes. And but she had similar, but I saw them like as the hero, and she said, are you kidding? I felt stuck watching you kids all the time. I go, I don't care. For me, you were the hero who was watching me. You were the heroine. You were our guardian. So it's funny the way their memories are a little bit different from mine, but the stories are the same. They were hungry, and they roamed around. And she did ask me one time, my sister, like, how did you get food? And I told her, well, I didn't, except for what I could find in the cherry tree or rhubarb patch. And I asked her how she got food, and she said, I found friends. I found friends, and I ate at their house, and they fed me. So that was interesting. We never talked about that until we were adults. Like, how did you find food? I don't know. How did you find food?
And, it's hard to relate to that if you didn't grow up searching for your next meal.
Yes, and of course, our next meal frequently was a piece of white bread with oleomargarine smeared all over it and sugar sprinkled on it. And to me, that was enough. I thought that was fine. It didn't dawn on me that all the food I saw on commercials, like, I could really have that because I could have what I had. And what was in our house was, for a while there, the government commodity food, nothing like that big tin jar of peanut butter to just make your day.
Did your mother work?
Part of the time she did. She had to wait. Back then, women had to wait till their children were a certain age before they could work. And I think my brother might have been 4. And she got a job at a King's Answering Service, which was over on the other side of the river. Mm-hmm. So over on the east side. And so she would take a bus to go there, but she would leave the house about 2:30 in the afternoon and then get off work at 11 o'clock at night. And my grandfather would graciously bring her home and drop her off. So my brother, sister, and I were on our own from 2:30 in the afternoon until 11 o'clock at night. And in the summer, that was kind of fun because we played outside until all the other children were called in. And then eventually we went in the house ourselves too and watched television and ate bread and margarine and sugar. But during school year, that was a huge challenge because there was nobody to say, hey, did you bring homework home? Let's do your homework. So that gave me a big disadvantage in school because I didn't ever do homework. I brought my books home and I set them in the foyer, which was work, carrying them home, and I carried them back to school. And I'm hoping that those stories will let people nowadays know that after-school programs for children where they have help with learning to read, help with their homework, maybe something to eat, keep them off the streets. I'm really hoping that helps people say, hey, you know what, let's help that child nowadays with what they're going to do in those hours from 3 o'clock until 11 o'clock at night when they are all alone.
You really did write this book to be a book of hope, didn't you?
Yes, I did. As I said, it started out with me being like, grrr, what was wrong with me? And then I started to realize, oh gosh, this is still going on. I want others to be happy that they had good lives. I want those who are suffering, I want them to have hope. And maybe the two groups can get together and really smile at each other and lift up each other and help each other grow. That's my hope. My hope for the book is enjoy my story because written through my perspective of being 7, 8, and 9, it's an easy read because it doesn't go into anything technical, just my experiences as a child. And I want the readers to say, hey, I could have done something for that child instead of giving her a box of 8 crayons, which made it impossible to color the states in the map of the United States. Maybe I'll donate a box of 24 crayons. Yeah. Make it a little bit easier on the kids. But it's a story of hope. It's a story that people can be kinder to each other. Everyone in a school has an opportunity, from the custodian to the librarian to the teachers to the principals. They all have an opportunity to maybe see what's behind that mask that this child is wearing.
All right, Vivian, hold on for one more segment. We'll be back with our final segment with Vivian Lee, The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food. Vivian has a website called vivianlee.net where you can actually buy the book, and we'll talk more about that too when we return.
I'm Paul Young, candidate.
Hi, back with you, chatting with Vivian Lee, who has written the book The Invisible Girl on Ames Street, a story of her growing up in Saginaw in the 60s, a 7, 8, and 9-year-old, subtitled A Child's Search for God, Walt Disney, Communists, and Food. Vivian, I have to ask,
Sure.
When you left Saginaw, did you further your education at all?
Well, I graduated from Arthur Hill, and I did not further my education until I got a job at, of all things, a radio station, where I became a radio marketing master. And so that is as far as the education went. But I have to tell you, coming back to Saginaw was education in itself. I met with the folks at the Castle Museum of Saginaw History, and they provided me with pictures for the book, and now they have partnered with me, and the book is available at the Saginaw Museum of History.
Oh, excellent.
So that was the biggest honor that I could have ever gotten from Saginaw, bigger than any degree I could have gotten anywhere, just to know that I went from being invisible to actually being a part of the history now of Saginaw. So that was a big inspiration.
So the book is available at the Castle Museum.
Yes.
And it's online at your website, vivianlee.net.
No, actually, it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
And Barnes & Noble has the ebook edition, and it's available all over the world through local bookstores. They can order it for them. But the vivianlee.net has a direct link to any questions to me, and it goes to my direct email, and then I personally respond back to everyone. And I did come up with chapter discussion questions for groups and book clubs who might want to say, hey, we want to talk about the chapter on going to a new school, dangerous people, whatever they might have questions on, and their group wants to do discussions. I actually made discussion questions. Unfortunately, since it's self-published, the discussion questions made the publishing so expensive. I said, you know what? I think I'll do these as requested, because that went way over budget.
I know one of the chapters that caught my attention was, it's entitled "Pets Are Bad." Explain that.
Oh, everyone wants to think that everyone can have a pet, but a pet in a home of poverty is just one more mouth to feed. And so unfortunately, as we were hungry, so were our pets.
Yeah.
That's a shame and a guilt that a child should never have to witness, that they allowed their pet to suffer.
So at what point in your life, Vivian, did you finally feel that you could take care of yourself and that you could feed yourself?
In 1989, when my car broke down in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, I met kind people who offered me jobs, mentored me. The first woman I met gave me a briefcase and offered me a job as my car was getting repaired. I was going to stay here until my car payments, my car repair payments were taken care of. But then I met people who gave me jobs and gave me opportunity. And, you just don't walk away when you've got someone reaching out. So I'm just thinking, had somebody in Saginaw in the 70s said, I'm going to mentor you, I'm going to give you a job, I probably would still be in Saginaw. It would have changed my life. And so that's the big thing, is the difference a person can make by mentoring and offering a job.
Well, Vivian, I've got to interrupt for time, but this has been a great pleasure. Again, vivianlee.net. You find the book on Amazon or at the Castle Museum, The Invisible Girl on Ames Street. Vivian, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your interest.
All righty. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.
You too. Bye-bye now.
And the news will be next.
Get ready to rock yourself.